It was on the 11th of April 1890 that Joseph passed away at the age of just 27. It was the first Friday following Easter Sunday. Mr. Ash, house surgeon, was called at 3:30 after being told what had happened and pronounced him dead. He himself was deeply shaken. Nurse Emma Ireland had seen Joseph around midday, and he had seemed in his usual health. His lunch had been brought to him on a tray at 1:30 by a ward maid, where Joseph was found to be still sitting in his bed. Initial witnesses on finding Joseph were profoundly shocked and disturbed, although it was suspected that Joseph had not much longer to live. One only has to look at the last two full photographs taken of Joseph in 1888 to see how terribly the condition was now affecting him, and he still had 2 years yet to live. When Treves had first seen him before he was taken to Belgium, Joseph was actually in quite good health and a strong young man, and apart of course from the visible manifestation of his condition, now believed to be Proteus syndrome, while possibly combined with neurofibromatosis. However, when Joseph was brought to the hospital after his rescue by Treves at his own volition from Liverpool Street Station, Treves himself was moved by the apparent and sudden deterioration since he had last seen him. Over the next few years, Joseph's condition affected his daily living more and more, as well as making his appearance increasingly appalling. Joseph had once had a wonderful dream, and with Tom Norman he may well have achieved it, to buy himself a little house where he could live in peace and quiet. But the truth was, he could never have done so. It was just a dream, and I wonder if he knew that deep down. Not only because he probably would have been harassed continually, just he had been all his life, but he could never have looked after himself. He needed constant care, and the hospital gave him that. So that which had truly been a most terrible twist of fate at the hands of his unscrupulous manager in Belgium made everything happen for the best. I personally cannot bear to think of what might have happened to Joseph if things had not worked out as they did, and because of the kindness of others. In the final years and months, Joseph's affected limbs became more unwieldy, his movements more clumsy. His left hip was painful and stiff where it had been damaged by a childhood fall. He had no ball and socket joint to speak of because of it. His heart weakened and he had bouts of bronchitis. And of course the size of his head became ever more massive, making it so heavy up to the time he passed away that sometimes he actually had to support it. Worse still, the growth that had been for the most part cut away from his upper jaw at the Leicester Infirmary began to grow again. Surely the most distressing thing for Joseph, in my opinion, with regards to his communication and eating, not just his appearance. It must have been awful for him, and perhaps also brought back memories again of his 4 years in the workhouse, which, as Treves said, the shudder of which is still upon him, because it was during that time he had the operation on his face. Therefore, it was quite usual by that time for Joseph to stay in his bed until the afternoon. What was perhaps unusual was that his lunch had remained untouched when he was found. Joseph enjoyed his food, however difficult he found it to eat, and probably never took it for granted. This by itself makes me suspect that something may not have been right. Joseph's bed was not a usual bed. It had been specially made for him by the hospital works department. It has been described as a couch type of bed, covered with leather and stuffed with horsehair perhaps. When Joseph was found, he was lying across the bed, the covers undisturbed, to suggest there had been no struggle. It was Treves' assumption that he had made the final attempt to sleep lying down and died of asphyxiation. Joseph knew all the while that to sleep prone may well be his undoing. He had once said to Tom Norman that to do so would risk him waking with a broken neck. Did Joseph really end his life in this way? A last desperate attempt to sleep as a normal man?